Marneus Augustus Calgar, Lord Macragge, is the current chapter master of the Ultramarines. As one might expect from an embodiment of the Ultramarines' nobility, Calgar is immune to fear and is resolutely courageous under fire. Where lesser men would dive for cover when being fired upon, Marneus Calgar takes quick stock of the situation, decides the best course of action, and only if he so decides to leap into cover will he do so. The Marneus Calgar known today was born Tacitan, a serf of the noble house of Calgar on the world of Nova Thulium. A companion of the house of Calgar's young heir Marneus, the two both sought honor and escape from the noble system by training to become Space Marines. Under the tutelage of their mentor Crixus, they trained for a time with other aspirants on Thulium Minor. However, one night, the duo discovered that Crixus and the rest of the aspirants were cultists of Khorne and engaging in blood rituals. Before they could escape, they were attacked by Crixus and his followers, and during the struggle, Marneus Calgar was killed. After escaping, Tacitan pledged that Marneus Calgar would live on and became a Space Marine, taking on his friend's identity. Tacitan went on to kill most of his corrupted classmates, but in the end was saved from Crixus by the Ultramarines. The tomb of the true Marneus Calgar exists in the world of Nova Thulium, listing his age of death at 12. After being inducted into the Ultramarines, he was deployed to the First Tyrannic War. During the Battle of Macragge against the Hive Fleet Behemoth, Calgar stood his ground on Cold Steel Ridge against a horde of Xeno's attackers. But the Tyranids were too many, and his body was rent and torn. Calgar faced down the Swarm Lord, but due to his injuries, was no match for the beast. Before he could be finished off, he was rescued by his fellow Ultramarines. As time went on, Calgar gained a notoriety for his incredible feats, eventually rising to the rank of Ultramarine Chapter Master. Within a vault inside the Fortress of Hera are records devoted to the achievements and deeds of notable Ultramarines. 28 volumes are devoted to Marneus Calgar, twice the number devoted to that of any other living Ultramarine, and unsurpassed by any other in the chapter's history except Roboute Guilliman himself. These achievements include leading the breaching assault on the Tyranid hive ship designated Behemoth Primus during the Battle of Macragge, single-handedly holding the gate against an Orc horde for a night and a day at the Siege of Zalathras, defeating an Eldar avatar in single combat, thus leading to the rout of Eldar forces at the Battle for Aura's Sepulchre, recapturing the Star Fort Indomitable from the demonic hordes of Macragge the Reborn, claiming data records from the world of Thrax as demons were overrunning it, slaying the Swarm Lord during the Battle of Ichar IV, surviving a Night Lord's ambush, and rallying the populace of the feudal world of Barathred to defeat hundreds of the traitorous Chaos Space Marines and leading the reclamation of Damnos from the Necrons. Additionally, Calgar also came to the aid of the Ultramarines' Second Company in M42, helping Company Captain Acheran and Lieutenant Demetrian Titus defeat a nascent Thousand Sons invasion. During the Ultramar campaign, Calgar initially refused Belisarius Caul's request to try and resurrect Roboute Guilliman, particularly due to the presence of Eldar among his expedition. However, the Chaos Assault and the words of Tigurius caused him to relent, and he fought alongside Saint Celestine and Voldusin, holding back the Black Legion long enough for his Primarch to be reborn. The resurrected Roboute Guilliman charged Calgar to secure the rest of Ultramar from the forces of Chaos as he embarked on the Terran Crusade. The induction of the Primaris Marines into the Adeptus Astartes was not an easy process by any means. The chapters of the Space Marines are arch-traditionalists, and some are conservative in the extreme, having upheld the same warrior traditions for thousands of years. Of course, the express command of Guilliman, now Lord Commander of the Imperium, eased the transition into the new era. For the Ultramarines and the vast majority of their successors, the word of the risen Primarch was good enough, and many chapters welcomed the Primaris battle brothers gladly. But there were those especially secretive or willful chapters who saw the incorporation of the Primaris Marines into their ranks as a dilution of their gene stock and a betrayal of their long-held culture. Some amongst the Adeptus Astartes suspected that the Primaris Marines, being stronger, more durable, and closer in blood to the Primarchs themselves, represented the obsolescence of traditional battle brothers. No amount of reason, of pointing out that what the Primaris offered in raw ability, they lacked in experience and versatility, could salve the spiritual wound dealt by the sight of the newcomers wearing their heraldry. The Primaris Marines of the Ultima founding had been swiftly inducted into brotherhoods that the incepted aspirants of yesteryear had given everything they had to join. Questions, heavy with the weight of destiny, hung in the air. Would the Primaris Marines ultimately make the traditional Space Marines extinct? Would the identity of each chapter's homeworld be diluted, with so many thousands of new recruits sourced from the stasis vaults of Mars? And was it possible for a Space Marine to be transformed into a Primaris, inheriting the benefits of Adeptus Mechanicus Arcanos science whilst retaining his personality and experience? This last question had been raised in Adeptus Astartes chapters across the galaxy. It was a query Lord Calgar had asked of Belisarius Cawl himself, and had discussed with those of his fellow chapter masters he was able to meet in person. Debate raged as to whether such an act was even possible without having deadly consequences for the recipient. For data that Archmagos Cawl had already amassed on the subject suggested there would be a 61.6% failure rate until the process could be perfected, which would take time. Then there was the moral concern of whether the process should be attempted at all. The dilemma was proving divisive indeed. Some claimed this was the ultimate destiny of all Adeptus Astartes, while from other quarters came whispers of rejection, even mutiny, at the prospect. The lords of the Ultramarines concluded that to ease the transition from centuries of imperial tradition to a new order, the theories of that raging debate would have to be put into practice. It was Marneus Calgar who stepped forward as the first test subject from the ranks of his storied chapter. It was a process he did not survive, though like his Primarch before him, he was to rise from the threshold of death once more. The operation to transform Calgar from a traditional Space Marine into a Primaris Marine was conducted in an auto-sterilized med vault. Thick with the tang of counterseptic and crowded with elaborate medical servitors, the room was dominated by the vast marble slab at its center, artfully carved with runnels to collect the copious streams of blood that would result from the procedure. The surgery was to be extensive and agonizing, a fact Marneus knew well from Call's tediously thorough descriptions of his masterwork process. A Primaris Marine is gifted 3 new organs in addition to the 19 grafted, sutured, and chemically implanted into an aspirant Space Marine. These are the Magnificat, which is buried deep within the brain to stimulate growth and to intensify other organ functions. The Belisarian Furnace, which releases a burst of hypersteroids and corticostimulants when a mortal blow is dealt so the Primaris may fight on. And the sinew coils, cable-like lengths of durasteel that encase every tendon and sinew in a metallic sheath that gives tremendous resilience and strength. During the implantation of these advanced organs, Marneus Calgar was cut open from crown to heel. His ribcage was cracked apart, and, at the climax of the operation, his physiology was suppressed to the point that his life slipped away. Choirs of cyber cherubs sang blissful, overlapping requiems, swaying their aspergillums that sacred incense might guide Calgar's spirit back to his body. The corpse lay in state, its flesh rent and open to the air, for what seemed to those watching like an age. 10 long minutes ticked past, then 20. Skull-faced surgeons clicked and muttered and stabbed at the tortured flesh. Those around the periphery of the apothecarium theater held their breath in dread. Then, with his wounds stitched closed by 1,000 jabbing needles and his mighty heart electrified to beat once more, the newly forged Lord Calgar was brought back to life. He broke his bonds with a strangulated, blood-flecked roar, stumbling to life as his Belisarian furnace brought him to battle readiness. Calgar had clawed his way back from beyond the brink of death, and in doing so, he had shown to his chapter that the transformation was possible. The Rubicon Primaris had been crossed, and a new path opened for the Adeptus Astartes. The awakened Calgar recovered and rejoined the war effort. Whilst en route to another front, he received a psychic vision from his good friend Tigurius, with a direct order from Guilliman himself to travel to Vigilus and prevent its fall at all costs. Calgar was appointed by Guilliman as the supreme commander of all imperial forces on Vigilus and is currently waging the War of Beasts via his combined war council known as the Vigilus Senate. Calgar remained chapter master of the Ultramarines throughout the ensuing Indomitus Crusade, as Guilliman was occupied elsewhere. However, he was now known as Lord Defender of Greater Ultramar instead of Master of Ultramar. During the Plague Wars, Calgar put down anti-imperial uprisings and mutinies by the Ultramar Auxilia in the Illyrian region of Macragge. He later slowed an Orc advance toward Metallica with rapid strike tactics. During the height of fighting against the forces of chaos on Vigilus, Calgar was able to turn the tide by forming an alliance with the Eldar on the world led by Farseer Keltok. Calgar was able to convince the Xenos to join him in the fight against chaos and cemented the pact by agreeing to Keltok's terms to secretly kill the slayers of Autarch Rylor in order to satisfy Saim Han's blood feud. With the Eldar now as allies, Calgar goaded Abaddon himself into a duel at Saints Haven, while the stealthy Eldar vessel Vol's Ghost collided with the Vengeful Spirit and detonated a cache of Deathstrike missiles. Though his ploy worked and forced the War Master to retreat to save the Vengeful Spirit, Calgar was badly wounded in the duel against Abaddon. One of his gauntlets, where torn away to expose a forearm, splintered and shorn of skin. The other was cut through, severing 2 of his fingers and slashing open both of the hearts that he was shielding with that hand. As he lay wounded, Greater Possessed Demonkin came and pierced both his hearts and ripped open his throat. He barely survived the battle. His ravaged throat was sutured, reinforced, and regrown. The apothecaries administering intense regeneration chem baths, cyborgization surgery, and a lengthy rejuvenant treatment. This made his voice sound mechanical afterward. The apothecarium also salvaged his secondary heart, but the primary was cloven through. Since then, he has been rarely seen on the front line of the battlefield, but continues to command the armies of the Imperium from the heart of the Vigilus Senate. In the aftermath of the battle, Calgar was declared a saint by the Adeptus Ministorum. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.